Hey y'all, Flipper Fred here. Welcome back as we take a look today at the knockoff of a Benchmade 940 Osborne. This is one of the most popular Benchmades that were out there for the longest time. I think there's still a pretty big fan following. I gotta say, this one just doesn't quite suit me all that well, but it has less to do with the fact that it's a knockoff, which is obviously not great. But the design is just not my cup of tea, I think. But we're going to take a look at the good, the bad, the ugly here, compare it to the real thing. Let's see how close they got and what this thing is all about here. Before we get started, if you would please, down below here, you will see that subscribe button, little notification bell. If you would hit that, man, it only takes a second, but it really helps us little guys out on the YouTubes. If you need to bail out early, throw your boy Fred a thumbs up on the way. I would greatly appreciate that. So, as I mentioned, this is a Temu clone. I didn't mention the Temu part. I did mention the clone knockoff part. I got this on Temu for $18. The real one you can get on Amazon for about $318. This is supposed to be the carbon fiber. You can see a little bit of that right here. I'm a little suspicious. We're going to take a closer look at that. I did notice, interestingly enough, on Amazon, there are now other clones, like true clones, that are not branded in any way, although they're an identical knife in every other way, that you can buy on Amazon. That was kind of interesting to me. So they have, I'll pull them up here on the screen. They have one that's an 8CR13 for $32, and they have one in D2 for $24. So I'll put links to all that stuff down below in the comments. Those are affiliate links. As always, you guys are big boys and girls now. You know that if you click on one of those and buy something, I might get a penny or two out of that. Although not a whole lot, but it does help your boy Fred out, so I greatly appreciate that too. Let's take a look at the box that it came in. This is true to form knockoff Benchmade box. This is pretty well done in terms of realism and authentically looking. I'm pretty sure if you put this side by side with one of the real ones, you would definitely notice some differences. But, you know, all in all, the box itself, I think they've done a pretty good job of cloning those as well. What came in the box, you always get these axis lock. I believe this one feels like a sticker. This feels different than the others. So I'm going to, make another idiot of myself. I tried this with the Spyderco and couldn't get it to peel off. And then someone told me in the comments theirs is a sticker. So I'm a little bummed about that. This feels very flimsy, not like the normal ones that I'm used to getting in these boxes. So it doesn't feel like a sticker, though. It feels like a sticker, but I don't think it is. It has the Benchmade little baggie there that it comes in. They did knock off the little booklet that comes with it as well. So they've just knocked all the stuff off. It clearly doesn't have the right foam. Anybody who's ever got a real Benchmade will recognize pretty quickly this is not the kind of foam they use. It's kind of big pebbly foam, but there also is kind of like a pill-shaped cutout, so it fits down into that gap there. So anyhow, there you go. Yeehaw for that. That's what you get in the box. It would certainly fool someone who's never bought a Benchmade before, but I think most people who have purchased one would be able to look at that pretty quickly and determine, yep, that's not the real deal. Let's take a little bit of a look at some size comparisons. It's often hard to get the size right in these videos. So this is the full-size Benchmade Crooked River. We're going to start with the Benchmades today because that's what we're looking at. Try to line them up down here by the rear end of them. You can see it's definitely smaller than the full-size Crooked River, but pretty darn close to the overall size of the bug out. Looks like maybe a half an inch or so short of that, and a little bit more of a cutting surface as well. But in terms of, how's it going to fit in your hand, it's going to fit very similar to the old Benchmade bug out. All right, you're a Spyderco fan, you're thinking about crossing over to the dark side of Benchmades. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. I'm not going to comment on that, but I bet a whole lot of other people will. There is your Paramilitary 2 and PM3. It obviously comes right in the middle of all these as well. Certainly more cutting surface than your PM3, which is not a PM3, sorry, your Para 3. Let's take a look at the specs. I'm going to pull the specs up on the side of the screen here so you can see how well this thing, see, it's a little stiff, and I got to tell you, I did take it apart just before this video. There's a lot of gunk in there, and I think I just really set my pivot a little too strong, so I'm going to loosen that little pivot screw just a little bit and get it back to smooth. It was very nice and smooth in the flips, so that was me You know, all Benchmades with these access locks take a bit to break in, and I haven't used this knife very much. Again, as I mentioned, doesn't really suit me all that well, just from my own personal preferences standpoint. Let's look at, again, the size. Full open size. Mine comes in about 2/10 of an inch shorter. You can see that difference is in the actual blade length because the handle lengths are identical. The blade thickness comes in a little bit thicker than the original. Mine's about 130 thousandths versus the 115 of the normal one. That's part of the reason I don't like it. It feels a little bit like a relatively thick blade. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Handle thickness is pretty much right on target. I got a 0.43 versus 0.44. We're going to call that a wash. This is what they call a reverse Tonto blade. All right, cool. Yeehaw for that. I'll go with that. The blade finish is quite a bit different. You can see on this one, let me wipe off some of the old fingerprints here. On mine, you can see what they did was they stonewashed it, because you can see up here where it's not been ground, that's stonewashed, and then they ground it down and left the grinds as a satin finish. Whereas on the real one, they must have, well, they had to have ground it first and then stonewashed it, because the entire blade is stonewashed on the original. So there's one pretty big departure. They do call this a flat grind. It is not hollow ground in any way. It's only a partial, which is another reason I don't like it. You got a relatively thick-ish kind of, you know, it's not terrible, but thick-ish kind of blade stock, and they only ground it from halfway down. That leaves this behind the edge a little thicker than I like, not quite as slicey, but we'll see if we can remedy that. The real one is carbon fiber with steel liners. This does have these partial steel liners. You can see to where this screw comes down here. That's just kind of steel liner in there. But I'm going to pull up a picture, and what you will see in our photo here is that they faked us out on this one. So it looks like carbon fiber up here on this top level. You can hopefully see that in the lighting here. But it doesn't look like carbon fiber down here on the side. So that was strange. So what I did was I took the scales off, and what we have here is basically plastic scales. They're not even G10. They're just straight up plastic. I think what they did was maybe put a thin layer of like a carbon fiber laminate on top and glued it down, and then they ground it down. Although it's hard to even see any lines here where they would have ground it. But anyhow, that's the best thing I can figure. I don't know how else they get this relatively convincing carbon fiber texture, but clearly you see the inside of the scales. This is just straight up plastic. So there's another pretty big departure from the original as well. The real one comes with an S90V steel. I think it says that right in here somewhere. Yeah, it's hard to see because of the lighting right under the thumb stud there, S90V. This, I don't know what it is. It's really hard to tell. Again, you can buy the knockoffs on Amazon all day long in either 8CR13, which is not that bad of a steel. Spyderco still makes some knives in 8CR13, or a D2. This one was only $18, so I'm going to guess it's probably the cheaper 8CR13, and maybe that's about, you know, the best I can hope for in terms of what the steel is. The weight comes in relatively dead on. You're talking 2/100ths of an ounce. We're going to call that a wash. Of course, it is the axis lock, and the pricing, as mentioned, you can get the real carbon fiber on Amazon for $318. I paid $18.39, and that is a bargain. So let's talk about maybe some of the pros and cons and the big differences. As I mentioned, these are just straight up plastic scales with a little bit of carbon fiber, maybe laminate, maybe, I don't know how else they get that. Maybe I'd say it's a sticker, but clearly there's nothing that you could peel off here. So they did a good job laminating it, if in fact that's what they did. I don't know how else they would get that design in there. The hardware is true to the original. You've got a T8 on the pivot screw and a T6 for all the body and the clips. The clip is also true to the original, this spoon-shaped design with the kind of Benchmade name USA in there. This is very authentic and true to the original. It's obviously not a full deep carry pocket clip. The other issue I have with this pocket clip is it's a little thin down here. This can be a little difficult to get into your pants. Sometimes this has to be a two-hander. However, overall, the clip's got plenty of space behind it. It's good springy steel. It feels like it's solid, shouldn't bend too easily. Doesn't create any real hot spots when you're carrying it. It is, of course, reversible, true to the original as well. In the back, we do have relatively authentic little spacers here. I'm going to say those are anodized aluminum, I believe, spacers. Blue matches the original. There's minimal jimping on here. They, almost always do this with their axis locks. They put jimping right there along the steel liners that hold the axis lock. No jimping to speak of in the blade or anywhere else. Oh, sorry, lied down here on the bottom half of the axis lock steel liners as well, but nothing on the blade or the rest of the handle here. The lock mechanism, axis lock, it is fairly smooth. You can see I still haven't worked it in, but if you've owned Benchmades, you'll know that they all take a little bit of break-in. And again, as I mentioned, I just haven't honestly carried this enough to really get it broken in. It is strong. I mean, I don't know why you would worry about banging on an axis lock like that, but there's no issues with the lock up there. It's as solid as it gets. There's no real blade play. So if that pivot pin gets a little too loose, you can get a little bit of side to side. Right now, it actually doesn't have it, and that's because I've got it tight enough to where you can see it still takes a good bit of force to move it in and out. But anyhow, no up, down, no side to side. If you loosen the pin up a little bit, make the blade a little more drop shut, then it will get a little looser. No real pivot lash or detent lash to speak of. The detent itself is good. Obviously, it's that axis lock in the springs will suck that blade right back in there. So it's not, it'd be hard to fail this thing because the amount of force it takes to flip it out to overcome that detent. So that's all good. Talk about the branding and the logos. So this is pretty close to the original. Anybody who's done these before, you can always recognize the differences in these logos. This one sits a little bit high on the bar. Usually the word Benchmade is right on that break line right there. On the back side, you've got the Osborne name here with the little boomerang design, a little patent pending number, and the S90V tucked in there behind the thumb studs. This is all pretty close to the original. In many ways, I look at these like a wax museum of knives from a certain period of time. I don't care for some knives like these if they don't really work well, or if they're made maybe with cheaper materials. I am not going to be taking this out into any kind of hard use environment beyond maybe opening a few boxes at most. Otherwise, I like to have it in my collection because this was such a significant design in a time frame, that being probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Everybody had these. Everybody loved these. And even today, it's still a very well-loved design as far as the, just the overall ergonomics. It's got kind of a long, flat blade before it tips up into that belly. It's relatively easy to do draw cuts. It's a very neutral handle, both forward and reverse grip styles. So I think that's the reason a lot of people liked it that much. Grab a piece of paper here just to show you. Mine did not come sharp. I have not sharpened it, so you can see it hangs right there. And there's the same spot. So yeah, if I go fast enough, I can cut through paper. But if you've done enough paper tests, you can even see like the edge on that cut. It's somewhat sharp. It'll open a package, but it's definitely not sharp and slicey like the way I typically prefer my knives to be. Now, I will say what I'm going to do with this thing is actually put it on the old work sharp and lay this edge back to maybe a 17 degree, because I don't care if I mess it up. I don't think I'll mess it up, but I'm going to turn this into a real slicey blade, and that may change everything about this knife for me. It may make me, really excited to want to carry this thing again. It's just to have it maybe sharp, and that may be part of the reason why I'm not that excited about it. So let's talk about the big differences. Obviously the carbon fiber versus plastic, the satin grind here versus the stone wash. I don't care for the clip being a little bit too shallow for me. The handle is a little slick, that plastic, it's not carbon fiber. It certainly doesn't have the texture or the grip of carbon fiber, so this can be a little slippery in your hands. Blade, as I mentioned, a little too thick for my taste. I'll lay that edge back and, see if that helps me like it a little bit more. Let's talk about what I do like. I mean, overall, it's a good size and weight. I mean, under 2.5 ounces. It's relatively thin. It fits in the pocket. It's not going to tear up your pocket in any way. Once you get it in there, it's not going to tear it up. It's light. It's easy to carry. It's got a nice, long, straight portion of the blade. That's great for long cuts that you might want to make. That belly is not going to push you out of the cut until you get all the way out to the tip. If you just like the design, you just want an inexpensive, 8CR13 or D2 version, go to that link down below. They're on Amazon. You can buy them unbranded. I believe they're G10s. which is still better than the plastic one I got. It is pretty true to the original in terms of just general look and feel and sizes and dimensions. All right, so I'm going to leave it right there. I appreciate you guys sticking with me through all of this. Again, down below, you would really help me out on your way out if you would hit that subscribe bell, hit the notifications. All that tells the YouTubes that your buddy Fred is something that other people may want to see as well. Throw me a thumbs up. Throw me a thumbs down if you think I did a horrible job. I know I'll get all the comments that say, why are you pushing clones and counterfeits and such? I appreciate you guys too. I honestly do. I know everybody has their own opinion, and I don't blame you. I'm not a big fan of the fact that, you know, companies can knock off intellectual property like this. I understand all that. So you're welcome to give me all those comments. I get it. Certainly hear them lots. And just so you know, I don't really disagree with you guys. But this is just me for my collection, my phase that I'm in right now. I'm going to put it away and just have a reminder maybe and sit down with my grandkids one day and say, hey, guys, this was an old knife they called the Benchmade 940 Osborne, and tell them a story that Grandpa could tell. All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.